So thanks for being here and thanks for listening to a story of failure. It has a happy ending. I'm going to tell you a story actually about a group of people, a rather large group of people, 7 billion people in fact. In fact, it's a story of a civilization. It's a story of our civilization. And it's sort of, we're going to move through some history and some future, and then we'll come to the ending and you get to help me write the ending. So the start of the story really is about recognising who we are. So where do we come from? Where are we going? Right? I've spent 35 years trying to understand this story, trying to work out what's going on, trying to work out where we're going next and what we should do to get ready for that future. And what I've learned in that process is something which I think we kind of need to all pay a lot of attention to right now. Because what I've learned when I see the world today, when we all look around, we see crises, we see tsunamis, Fukushima nuclear reactors, we see floods in Iowa, we see droughts in Texas, we see food crises in Russia, we see a lot of environmental issues and we see a lot of economic issues, we see growth stalling, we see debt crises, we see many things happening and we kind of look at them and we go, yeah, it's a bit tough, but it always works out in the end, doesn't it? Eh? Always comes good and it's a little bit worse than it used to be, but maybe that's the way I'm looking at it. Maybe we'll just get through it and it isn't so bad. And I guess what I see now, after 35 years of looking at our story as we've moved through these times to where we are now, is I look at that story a bit differently. And I look at this time a bit differently. And I look at it with a very simple phrase. And what I see is the earth is full. The earth is full of us. It's full of our technology. It's full of our economy. It's full of all the things that we're doing and consuming and wasting and using up. And as a result, we have a bit of a problem. The problem we have is that the path we're on is unsustainable. And when things are unsustainable, we've forgotten that sustainability is kind of not a philosophy or a point of view, it's a question of physics. And so when something is unsustainable, it eventually stops, right? And the thing that's going to stop in our case is our model of progress. The way we move through society with this ever-growing, massive global economy is going to stop. Now, that gives us a few choices we'll come back to in a few minutes, but the point is what's going to stop is not the ecosystem. What's going to stop is the machine that's driving it. So when the earth is full, what that means is we have kind of two choices, and this is a multiple choice question. Two options. One is, if the earth is full, the economy keeps growing. Option A, choice A, the earth gets bigger. Option 1. Anyone in favour of that? No, I didn't think so. Well, in favour of it, yes, but not likely to happen. Secondly, the economy stops growing. And that's where we are. Where we are is that economic growth, our model of progress, our idea about solving all of our issues has come to an end. And that's kind of a bit of a problem because that's kind of the big idea that we've got. As we heard from Hans Rosling earlier, it's how we fix everything. It's how we fix poverty. It's how we fix health. It's how we fix life expectancy. It's how we fix happiness. Economic growth is the tool we use to make everything better. Now, that's a big call. So if I'm saying economic growth is dead, I think I'd better give you a few more facts to support that argument because that's a pretty big call given that's the only idea we've got about progress and that gives us a few dilemmas to deal with. So let's look at the numbers. So there are many ways of looking at this and let's be clear, whenever a scientist or a group of scientists in a comprehensive way looks at the Earth's ecosystem and the economy's use of those resources, remembering I'm not talking about polar bears here, I'm talking about us. Right? So I'm talking about the things that we draw from the environment to support our economy. And the things that we draw are being used in an unsustainable way. So for one example, the Global Footprint Network says that we're using about 150%, of the hectares that we have on the world to support our economy. What that means is we need 1.5 planets to support this economy. That's not likely to happen, right? And other people look at it. The Stockholm Resilience Centre says we're past 3 of the 7 planetary boundaries that we can't afford to cross. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, 2,000 scientists looking at all the ecosystem services that we use, say that we're using 16 of the 25 ecosystem services unsustainably. So my point is that whatever way we look at it, whoever looks at it, comes to the same conclusion, and that is that we're behaving unsustainably And if we keep on behaving unsustainably, it's going to stop. Now, that presents a bit of a problem. I would say probably a very big problem, but that's actually just the beginning, because see, what we plan to do from here is to keep growing the economy. And all the assumptions we make about the future, all the assumptions about China living like we do, about the number of cars, the amount of oil that we're going to use, the fact that we have 7 billion people who are determined and committed to growing their economies for good reasons so they can eat and live like we do. That means that by 2050, if we carry on as we are, we're going to have an economy 3 or 4 times this size. So that means we go from 150% of capacity to about, even allowing for efficiency improvements and so on, to about 300 or 400% of capacity. Now, think about that. Just think about that. It's going to cause a few problems. It's actually not going to cause the problems you think it's going to cause, though, because we're not going to do it. Because it's not possible to do that. We can't have an economy that's 3 or 4 times the size of the planet because the planet's not going to grow to comply with our wishes. These are not the rules that we make. The rules of physics and chemistry and biology are set, and you can't break them. Mother Nature is a tough mother. She doesn't negotiate. She doesn't care if we want to solve poverty. She doesn't care if you want a new car. She doesn't care about anything much. She just has rules. And you break the rules and there are consequences. And the consequences are what we see around us today. So, if that's not going to happen, and believe me, in this talk we get to the good part, so just stay with me here. If that's not going to happen, what is going to happen? So if we keep on growing this economy up against the limits and the ecosystem isn't going to comply with our wishes, what is going to happen? And so I answer that question by saying, open your eyes and look around. Because what we see today is what's going to happen, but it's going to be more of that, and there's going to be less denial about that. And when I say that, look around today, think about the fact that last year there was a drought in Russia, right, that led to the Russian government banning the export of wheat, which took out 10% of global exports, and therefore wheat prices went up by 60%, which therefore led to uprisings in Egypt and Tunisia and elsewhere. That one worked out pretty well. It may not next time, right? So that's what happens, right, when things go wrong. What happens when you can't get enough oil at the right price is you dig deeper and take more risks, right? BP discovered, to its cost and to ours, if you drill for oil where you can't control the consequences, there are consequences, and it's very expensive for the environment and for us. Right? What we find is when the food supply gets constrained as it is now, that countries need to get food and therefore they do whatever it takes to get food. So in the last 3 or 4 years, since the record food prices of 2008, right, China, Kuwait, a few more countries have gone around the world and bought up an area of land. Think about this, bought up an area of land equivalent to half all the arable land in China. They're not buying farms, they're buying countries. Right? Because they need the food. And of course, that's what this world looks like. Constrained resources means you do what it takes to get the essential resources of food, the essential resources of minerals, and therefore you get hold of the land and it becomes a land grab. And we could go on with all the examples like that. Look around what we see today. We're seeing the consequences of high oil prices. We're seeing commodity prices rise 70% in the last 10 years. We're seeing economists and fund managers like Jeremy Grantham saying we've come to the end of cheap commodities. So the system is straining at the limits. The Earth is, this is the PowerPoint part of my presentation. This is the Earth. Everyone see the PowerPoint? Very energy efficient. This is the economy. It's bigger than the Earth. So it's being squeezed in, and as it hits the sides, it goes kabang, boom. 2008 record food and oil prices, whoop, shrink. 2010, China's growing again, oh good, whoop, shrink. Right, so we're bumping up against the edges of the capacity of the Earth. That's our economy. When we bump up too hard, it shrinks and it comes back, and then we do it again, and we keep on hitting ourselves against our heads against that wall until we wake up, and that's going to be at some point, but unfortunately not soon. So when I say not soon, I mean because we're talking about the end of economic growth. We're talking about the model of human progress that we have depended upon, that we rely upon as having to go on forever to fix all our problems is broken. Now you think we have denial about climate change, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? You think about challenging the idea of the very essence of human progress and think about how impossible that seems to you. Think about not pursuing growth. Think about not expanding your economy. Think about the consequences of that for society. And you think that's impossible, that we can't stop that. Okay, let's go back to point A. Let's think about 1.5 Earths, and then 2 Earths, and then 3 Earths, and the rules of physics and chemistry, right? It's not possible to keep growing, therefore we won't, therefore we face a problem. And therefore we're going to have to change, but not just yet. Soon, this decade, but not just yet. So what do you do with that information? It hurts your head. It hurt my head. 2005, I woke up to what I saw coming. I looked at the numbers. I spent 3 months on a sabbatical reading all the scientific reports and not feeling very good and going, oh my God, that's just not good. That's not good. That's very bad. That's really annoying. And then I got angry, right? And I got really cranky, and then I wanted to go and destroy Exxon and, like just do bad things like I used to do, right? Which is very satisfying, let me tell you, very satisfying when you can unleash all your anger on some other person who desperately deserves it. Highly recommended. It turns out not very effective because after 35 years I'm still a hopeless failure at my life's mission, but it doesn't work. But I got angry, I got frustrated, I got angry at myself, for being a failed environmentalist, I got annoyed at everyone in the world for being so stupid, I got annoyed with Exxon, I got annoyed with the UN, everyone was just useless. Useless. What's wrong with them all? So I looked in the mirror. And what I realised was that I was actually not angry, I was not frustrated, I was just sad. Eh? I was sad because we're going to lose half the biodiversity of the planet. I was sad because we're going to see suffering on an immense scale, right? And I couldn't change that anymore. So I felt sad. I was giving a presentation once to a bunch of business executives in New York at a Cambridge University seminar and started crying. And that's not a good look for a big Aussie bloke, believe me. Let me tell you about the world. And what was going on was the anger was becoming sadness at the pain that I saw coming. And then I actually moved on, and now I'm excited. Now, isn't that confusing? You're confused. Imagine how I felt. Imagine how my mother felt. Going from Greenpeace to the Air Force to advising the head of DuPont. That's pretty confusing. But I was very excited when I finished this process. And I was excited for a very simple reason. And that is that when you think about humanity, think about who we are, how we behave, and what we do, we're really good in a crisis. So when I say there is the mother of all crises coming, I get very excited because I know we are going to do unbelievable and extraordinary things. Now, it's sad. Things will go bad. There'll be consequences, right? And it's really sad that we didn't need to do it this way, but we have and we are, and this is where we are today, and we're going to do it this way. So that crisis means we're going to unleash all the creativity, all the amazing capacity of humanity, which we've witnessed here today in many of the presentations. People are incredible. We are a quite extraordinary species. And when you look at World War II, when you look at anyone who's been diagnosed with cancer or any sort of life-threatening illness and what they're capable of, think about a company, right, going through a financial crisis and how they can transform. Think about anyone facing a really significant problem and you suddenly see humanity at its best, right? And that's what we're about to see. So then you ask the question, okay, but is there time? Do we have the ability to do that? And I wasn't sure. So I worked with Jürgen Randers, professor from Norway, who was one of the authors of the Club of Rome Limits to Growth report in 1972. And we said, heaven forbid for all of you, what would we do if we were in charge? Right? Believe me, that would be really scary. But it's okay, I'm not going into politics. So what would happen, right, is that we would treat this like it was a threat to the existence of civilization, because it is. We would behave as though, like in World War II, everything we believed, but in this case, really everything we believed was under threat. The future of humanity, our lives of our children, right, the progress of human society as a species, everything was under threat. What will we do? Well, we'd fix it, wouldn't we? So then we thought, oh, how would we fix it? Can we fix it? And our conclusion was, within 20 short years, with a relatively low cost and a bit of inconvenience, comparable to the sacrifices made in World War II on the home front, not on the war front, right, we could actually eliminate CO2 emissions, for example, from the economy inside 20 years. We could do the first half in about 5 years. We could do it with existing technologies, and that's just climate change. We can do the same thing for water. We can do the same thing for every issue we face if we chose to do it. Now, we worked out it would be quite expensive. It would be quite inconvenient. It would be a lot cheaper proportionally on GDP than it was in World War II, but it would be a lot cheaper, for example, than the collapse of civilization. I must confess we didn't exactly model the price of the collapse of civilization, but experts tell us it's really expensive and very, very inconvenient, so we should avoid it. And the point is that we know how to fix it. We know what to do, we know when to do it, we know how to do it, and we're certainly capable of doing that. So that leads me to kind of the next thing I need to tell you, and this is supposed to be the sort of uplifting part of the talk. I'm just taking you down once more, sorry. This is something we have to face up to. It's sort of worse than the death of the polar bears. It's probably worse than the collapse of civilization for many, and many of you can't imagine recovering from this. And of course, what I'm referring to is the end of shopping. Small moment for grief and the passing. And what I mean by that is that we're not going to have shopping anymore as the defining characteristic of human civilization. We cannot have consumer madness, right, as the pinnacle of human achievement. We can't have an economy built around the idea of going shopping as the source of all our happiness and satisfaction. Now, the good news is we can't do it because the earth is full. The even better news is it's not working anyway. Right? The last 30 years we've doubled the income in most developed countries per capita, and we haven't moved the line of life satisfaction at all. Right? So the whole system, right, that we're working on actually isn't working to have human progress. We are not achieving what we set out to achieve. Once we achieve the sort of basic needs being met, we don't get any happier. Therefore, this whole game, this whole machine that's destroying life on Earth isn't working anyway. So that leaves us with a problem. What do we do? What we do is we know what works already. What works to be happy is not stuff. What works to be happy is community. What works to be happy is being healthy. What works to be happy is giving to other people. What works to be happy is learning new things, discovering knowledge. Right? That's what makes you happy. And we know that those things aren't available for sale in Walmart. They don't cost any money, right? And they're universally available everywhere, and we know how to do them. So that is the basis of an economy that we need to build. What does that feel like? How do we do that? Just think about it on a very personal level. So can you imagine buying 10% less stuff next year? Tough, but just think about this. We've got civilization at stake. Can you buy 10% less stuff next year? Of course, the answer is easily. Would you like 5 more weeks holiday next year? Yeah. Right. A lot more than you like 10% more stuff that you haven't got time to use anyway. Right? As Clive Hamilton, the Australian writer, says, the global economy is built on this idea that we should buy stuff we don't need with money we haven't got to impress people we don't like. Duh. So let's stop that and let's do something different. And that's where our story is. Our story is at this moment, right? And the story's ending hasn't been written yet because we're kind of waiting for you to write it, right? And we get to write it together. We get to decide what the future looks like. We get to decide whether 7 billion people are happy, contented, and have a good life. We get to decide if our kids have that world, right? And that's our choice. The future doesn't happen. The future is decided and written by us. Thank you.